Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our in-depth international affairs analysis on Headpost. Please take a moment to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. Your support provides the Headpost team with the motivation to continue bringing you the most multi-dimensional and sharpest perspectives every day. Let us dive deep into the heart of global hotspots. We begin today's story with decisive messages from the head of the White House. As the conflict in the Middle East passes through its most intense phases of combat, US President Donald Trump has issued a preemptive summary statement. Speaking to a crowd of supporters in Kentucky, Mr. Trump boldly declared America has won. With his signature confidence, he asserted that the outcome of the war was essentially decided in its opening hours when Iran's air and naval power were neutralized. He cited impressive statistics, claiming dozens of enemy warships had been knocked out of action. However, behind that declaration of victory, Mr. Trump also strategically embedded a crucial message. America is in no rush to leave. He emphasized that Washington must finish the job to ensure they do not have to return to deal with similar messes every 2 years. Yet, the reality on the battlefield and intelligence assessments from deep within the system paint a much more complex picture. Reuters, citing high-ranking US intelligence sources, released a report that stands in stark contrast to the optimism of politicians. According to the report, despite enduring nearly 2 weeks of relentless bombardment and losing a significant number of high-ranking commanders, Iran's core leadership remains incredibly resilient. Analysts suggest that the power structure in Tehran, specifically the control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC), is far from collapsing. The cohesion between the clerical and military classes remains surprisingly intact. Even Israeli intelligence officials, in closed-door meetings, have reportedly admitted a harsh reality. There is no guarantee that external military operations can trigger an internal regime collapse. This places the Trump administration in a dilemma. On one hand, domestic public pressure and skyrocketing oil prices are pushing him to end the campaign quickly. On the other, finding an honorable exit, a victory deal, while Tehran's hardliners maintain absolute control, is a daunting task. Due to this stalemate, scenarios involving the deployment of US ground forces appear to remain on the table at the Pentagon. One of the greatest pressures forcing Washington to recalibrate its steps is the economic and energy puzzle. To counter market shocks, the US Department of Energy recently played a strategic trump card, the decision to release 172 million barrels of oil from the nation's strategic Petroleum Reserve, SPR. The plan to pump this massive volume into the market is expected to last approximately 120 days. This decision marks a dramatic shift from President Trump's initial stance. During the early days of the conflict, White House officials remained confident that tapping into reserves was unnecessary. Previously, Mr. Trump had vehemently criticized his predecessor, Joe Biden, for using strategic reserves to regulate prices during the conflict in Eastern Europe. However, as domestic crude oil prices surged by dozens of cents in a single week due to disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, the pressure of inflation ahead of key elections forced Mr. Trump to resort to the very measure he once opposed. To alleviate long-term energy security concerns, the Department of Energy also pledged to repurchase even larger quantities to replenish the reserves once the crisis concludes. Meanwhile, despite devastating strikes, Tehran continues to show that it holds economic weapons capable of inflicting high damage on the West. Iran's military command issued a chilling message, warning the world to prepare for a worst-case scenario, crude oil prices reaching $200 per barrel. This is no empty threat. It is backed by a series of attacks on cargo ships and oil tankers in the Gulf region. An Iranian military representative mockingly remarked that oil prices depend on regional stability and that US intervention is single-handedly destroying it. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the passage for 1/5 of the world's oil, is creating the most severe supply chain disruption since the energy crisis of the 1970s. Faced with the specter of a widespread economic recession, European nations are deeply concerned. Spain's Minister of Energy has voiced strong support for the International Energy Agency's IEA proposal to execute the largest strategic oil release in history. The planned release of up to 400 million barrels is double the amount released during the Ukraine crisis. European powers are racing against time, utilizing every financial tool and strategic reserve to prevent a price surge that threatens to incinerate the fragile economic recovery of the old continent. As the attacks continue, the lives of people in the two central nations of the conflict reveal starkly contrasting pictures. In Israel, images of destruction and an eerie sense of peace are intertwined. In the central region, the wreckage of ballistic missiles intercepted by air defense systems is scattered across the landscape, embedded in the ground like scars of war. Sirens have become a familiar part of daily life. Yet in the city of Tel Aviv, a relatively relaxed atmosphere persists. Despite the threats lurking in the sky, people still flock to the beaches at sunset, jogging, walking pets, or playing sports. This composure stems partly from absolute confidence in the Iron Dome multi-layered defense system, and partly as a form of psychological resistance, a way to prove that life must go on despite the bombs. However, contrasting the peace on the beach are warmongering statements from Israel's war cabinet. The Israeli defense minister has issued stern declarations affirming that the military campaign against Tehran will have no time limit. Their goal is not just to break military capability, but also to create enough pressure to incite the Iranian people to overthrow the current political system. Tel Aviv asserts they will fight until every existential threat is completely eliminated. To realize those declarations, Israel is feverishly preparing for another equally fierce front, the northern border. A massive deployment of heavy machinery, armored vehicles, and elite units, including the notorious Golani Brigade, is being urgently moved by the IDF to the border with Lebanon. These moves are seen as preparation for a large-scale ground invasion targeting Hezbollah's strongholds. Hezbollah's continuous rocket fire into Israeli territory to share the burden with Tehran has pushed the situation past the red line. Consequently, southern Lebanon is enduring a rain of devastating bombs, resulting in hundreds of deaths and a massive wave of nearly 700,000 displaced people. Israel has issued an ultimatum, demanding that Lebanese civilians immediately evacuate areas where Hezbollah is present or risk becoming victims of destructive airstrikes. This escalation is pushing the United Nations into an extremely difficult position. UN humanitarian aid officials have sounded the alarm before the Security Council while describing the situation along the blue line, the boundary separating Israel and Lebanon, as extremely dangerous, where civilians are paying the ultimate price for the confrontation between armed factions. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese people are currently homeless, lacking food, clean water, and medical care, creating the region's worst humanitarian crisis in decades. While political and military undercurrents restructure the Middle East, environmental consequences are also being flagged by experts at a critical level. Mohammad Darwish, an Iranian environmental expert working for UNESCO, provided a poignant analysis of his country's situation. According to him, Iran currently faces not only risks to life and infrastructure, but cannot endure any further environmental devastation. For years, Iran has struggled with severe ecological crises. Land subsidence from groundwater, over-extraction, chronic air pollution, shrinking wetlands, and prolonged droughts. Attacks on oil refineries and fuel depots are creating extreme weather phenomena like toxic black rain. If water dams or power plants become targets, clean water supplies for tens of millions of people in megacities will be completely cut off. The environmental consequences of this war, even if it ends tomorrow, will require decades and billions of dollars to remediate. The dark cloud of war spares no one. Even Turkey, a nation boasting the second largest military in NATO, is experiencing moments of extreme tension. Latest reports indicate that the Turkish military has urgently deployed Patriot air defense systems along highways in Malatya province. This move follows the detection and assisted interception of at least 2 Iranian ballistic missiles that strayed into Turkish airspace in recent days by the NATO early warning radar system at the Kurechik base. Although Ankara consistently strives to maintain a neutral stance and act as a regional mediator, the constant stray fire over their skies has forced President Erdogan to issue stern warnings to Tehran. This incident also exposes a security vulnerability for Turkey. Despite being a rapidly rising power in the global defense industry, they have yet to achieve full autonomy in a domestic air defense system sufficient for deterrence, still relying on NATO-deployed interceptors. If a small error in trajectory occurs, Turkey could easily be drawn into an unwanted war, triggering the entire Western military alliance. Please empower our channel by hitting the like button, sharing this video with friends and family, and especially don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any critical news developments on the world map in the coming days. We wish you and your family a day filled with peace, health, and success. Goodbye, and see you in the next news updates from Headpost.